The scissors slipped from Dave Sullivan's fingers for the third time that morning, clattering against the checkerboard floor of his barbershop. He bent down to retrieve them, muttering under his breath about needing that second cup of coffee. The familiar weight of the tools felt wrong in his hands today, like his body was expecting something different to happen. Outside, the streets of Neo-Chicago hummed with their usual morning chaos. Flying cars zipped between the towering apartment blocks while delivery drones buzzed past his storefront window. Dave had inherited this little corner shop from his grandfather, and despite the city changing around him, he kept things exactly the same. Same red and white barber pole, same cracked leather chairs, same routine every single day, 3 cups of coffee before 9.
Check the appointments.
Sweep the floor, oil the clippers. It had worked for 15 years, and Dave saw no reason to change it now. He poured his third cup from the ancient coffee machine that wheezed and gurgled like a dying animal, then settled into his routine of preparing for the day's first customer. The crash came without warning. Glass exploded inward as something small and dark tumbled through his front window, sending shards skittering across the floor. Dave jumped backward, coffee mug flying from his hands to shatter against the wall. His heart hammered as he stared at the hole where his window used to be, cool morning air rushing into the shop. A tiny whimper came from somewhere near the scattered glass. Dave grabbed the broom handle, holding it like a weapon as he crept forward. Whatever had come through his window was still moving. He could see it now, a small form about the size of a house cat curled up and shaking among the glass fragments. Dark liquid pooled beneath it. "Easy there," Dave whispered, setting down the broom. "Easy." The creature lifted its head and Dave's breath caught in his throat. 2 large eyes stared back at him, swirling with colors he had never seen before. Purple mixed with gold, then shifted to deep blue. The thing had scales that shimmered like oil on water, changing from black to green to silver as it moved. Delicate wings, almost transparent, fluttered weakly at its sides. This was definitely not a cat. Dave knelt down slowly, keeping his movements gentle and predictable. The creature watched him with those impossible eyes, intelligence flickering in their depths. It was hurt badly. One wing hung at an odd angle and several scales had been torn away, revealing pale flesh beneath. "What are you?" Dave murmured, reaching out with one finger. The creature sniffed his hand, then pressed its tiny head against his palm. It made a soft peeping sound like a baby bird. Dave felt something twist in his chest. Whatever this thing was, it was scared and in pain, and it trusted him enough to seek comfort. He pulled off his barber's apron and wrapped it carefully around the shivering form. The creature nestled into the warm fabric, its breathing shallow but steady. Dave could feel its tiny heart racing against his palms. "Okay, little guy, let's get you cleaned up." Dave carried the bundle to his back room where he kept a small first aid kit. He had learned basic emergency care years ago when his nephew had started visiting the shop regularly. Kids were always getting scraped up, and parents appreciated a barber who could handle minor injuries. He laid the creature on a clean towel and began examining its wounds. The torn scales would need cleaning, and that wing definitely looked broken. The creature watched him work, making small peeping sounds whenever he found a tender spot. Sorry, Dave whispered each time. "I know it hurts." As he worked, Dave noticed more details about his unexpected patient. The scales weren't just changing color randomly. They seemed to shift based on the creature's mood. Right now they were mostly pale blue and silver, which Dave guessed meant pain or fear. When he spoke gently, they warmed to soft gold. The wings were the most amazing part. Even damaged, they were beautiful. The membrane stretched between delicate bones was nearly transparent, with veins of silver running through it like the finest jewelry. Dave had seen pictures of bat wings before, but these were different. More elegant, more purposeful. He cleaned the wounds as gently as he could, using antiseptic that made the creature peep in protest. The wing was the worst problem. Dave had no idea how to set a broken wing on something that might not even be from Earth. He did his best to immobilize it with soft bandages, hoping it would heal on its own. "There," he said finally. "That's the best I can do." The creature looked up at him and made a sound that was almost like a purr. Its scales shifted to warm gold with hints of green. Dave took that as a good sign. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Breaking: alien wildlife escapes from crashed diplomatic vessel. Citizens warned not to approach unknown creatures. Dave stared at the screen, then looked down at the small form wrapped in his apron. The news report continued with grainy footage of something that looked very much like what was now sleeping in his back room. Galactic Animal Control units are conducting sweeps of the metropolitan area. Any citizen who encounters escaped specimens should immediately contact authorities. Do not attempt to feed or shelter these creatures, as their biology and behavior are completely unknown. A reward of 10,000 credits is being offered for information leading to the capture of escaped specimens. Dave's blood ran cold. Specimens, they were talking about living creatures like they were lab rats. He looked down at his patient, now curled up and breathing peacefully in the makeshift nest he had created. This wasn't some dangerous animal. It was hurt and scared and trusting him to help. Through his broken window, he could hear the distant whine of official vehicles. The sweep teams were getting closer. Dave made a decision that would change his life forever. He scooped up the sleeping creature, apron and all, and headed for the stairs that led to his small apartment above the shop. If the authorities wanted to treat this little being like a specimen, they would have to go through him first. As he climbed the stairs, the creature opened those swirling eyes and looked at him. For just a moment, Dave could have sworn he saw something like gratitude in their depths. Then it closed its eyes again and settled deeper into the warm fabric, trusting him completely. Dave Sullivan, barber and creature of habit, had just become a fugitive from galactic law. And somehow that felt exactly right. Dave's apartment had never felt smaller. He paced between his tiny kitchen and equally tiny living room, stealing glances at the creature now sleeping on his couch. In the 3 days since the crash, it had already grown noticeably larger. What started as cat-sized was now closer to a small dog, and its wings had healed enough to flutter occasionally when it dreamed. He had started calling it Pip because of the soft peeping sounds it made. The name seemed to fit, especially when the creature tilted its head and looked at him with those color-shifting eyes. Sometimes Dave caught himself having full conversations with Pip, explaining his daily routines or complaining about difficult customers. The creature always listened, watching his face intently as if trying to understand every word. The strangest part was how quickly Pip had adapted to his schedule. Every morning at 6:30, those swirling eyes would open just as Dave's alarm went off. Pip would stretch its wings, make a few soft peeps, then follow him downstairs to the shop. Dave had rigged up a hiding spot behind the supply cabinet where Pip could stay during business hours, surrounded by old towels and a water dish. What surprised Dave most was Pip's diet. The creature had no interest in the meat or fish Dave offered. Instead, it seemed fascinated by his coffee routine. The first time Dave dumped used coffee grounds in the trash, Pip had climbed out of its hiding spot and started eating them directly from the garbage. Now Dave saved the grounds in a special bowl, mixed with chocolate shavings from the candy bar he ate every evening. Pip devoured the mixture like it was the finest meal imaginable. "You've got expensive taste for a stray," Dave told Pip as he prepared the morning mixture. The creature's scales shifted to happy gold patterns as it watched him work. Business had been unusual lately. Customers kept talking about the alien search, speculating about reward money and sharing wild theories about what the escaped creatures might be. Dave nodded and made appropriate sounds while his stomach twisted with guilt. Mrs. Rodriguez, from the apartment upstairs, had even brought pictures she claimed showed alien footprints in the alley behind the building. Probably just a big cat, Dave had said, not mentioning that Pip had indeed been exploring the alley during their evening walks. The evening walks had become their special time together. Dave would close the shop, check that the street was clear, then take Pip out through the back door. The creature loved exploring, sniffing at interesting smells and occasionally trying to catch insects with its quick tongue. Its coordination had improved dramatically as it healed. Where it once stumbled, it now moved with graceful precision. Tonight was different, though. As they made their usual circuit around the block, Pip suddenly stopped and stared at the sky. Its scales flickered through a rapid sequence of colors Dave had never seen before. Anxiety? Excitement? Fear? "What is it, Pip?" The creature made a new sound. Not the usual peep, but something more complex. Almost like speech, but in a language Dave couldn't begin to understand. Pip repeated the sound several times, growing more agitated with each attempt. Then Dave heard it too. A low humming from overhead. He looked up to see official vehicles circling several blocks away, searchlights sweeping the streets below. The search teams were expanding their operation. "Come on, buddy. Time to go inside." But Pip didn't move. Instead, it made that strange almost speech sound again, more urgently this time. The creature was staring directly at Dave now, those swirling eyes intense with something like desperation. It was trying to tell him something important. Dave knelt down beside his unusual companion. "I wish I could understand you." Pip stepped closer and pressed its head against Dave's chest right over his heart. Then it pulled back and made the sound again, slower this time. Dave listened carefully, trying to make sense of the alien syllables. Pa-li. Nah? Pip's eyes widened and its scales flashed bright gold. It nodded eagerly, a gesture that looked oddly human. "Is that your name? Polina?" More happy golden flashes. Pip, now apparently Polina, made the sound again, then pointed with one clawed finger toward the sky where the searchlights continued their sweep. "There are others like you up there?" Dave asked. Polina nodded again, then made a series of different sounds. Each one was accompanied by gestures toward different parts of the sky. Dave began to understand that each sound might be a name. There were others out there, probably caught and caged by the search teams. "Your friends?" The creature's scales shifted to deep blue. The color Dave had learned meant sadness or distress. Polina made a new gesture, wrapping its small arms around itself in what was clearly meant to represent protection or comfort. "Family?" Dave said softly. "They caught your family." Polina's confirming nod broke Dave's heart. This intelligent, gentle creature had been alone and afraid for days, healing in his apartment while its loved ones were imprisoned somewhere in the city. No wonder it had been trying so hard to communicate. They hurried back inside as the searchlights drew closer. Dave settled Polina on the couch and brought out the evening chocolate mixture, but the creature only picked at it listlessly. Its scales remained that sad blue color, occasionally flickering to the dark patterns Dave associated with fear. "We'll figure something out," Dave promised, though he had no idea what he could possibly do against official galactic authorities. "I won't let them hurt you or your family." Polina looked at him for a long moment, then crawled into his lap and curled up like a cat. Its scales slowly shifted from blue to the warm gold that meant trust and contentment. Even scared and worried about its family, the creature still found comfort in Dave's presence. As Dave gently stroked the smooth scales, he realized how much his life had changed in just 3 days. He had always been a creature of habit, finding peace in routine and predictability. Now his quiet existence revolved around protecting someone who was depending on him completely. The responsibility should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the most important thing he had ever done. Outside, the searchlights continued their sweep of the city, and Dave began planning something he never thought he would attempt. Somehow he was going to find a way to reunite Polina with its family, even if it meant going up against forces far beyond his understanding. The morning that changed everything started like any other, except Polina had grown again overnight. Dave stared at his companion, who was now roughly the size of a medium dog and definitely too big to hide behind the supply cabinet. The creature's wings had also developed more, taking on the leathery appearance Dave remembered from old pictures of dragons in storybooks. "We're going to need a better hiding spot," Dave muttered, then nearly dropped his coffee mug when Polina responded. "Yes, hiding becomes difficult as I mature." Dave's mug hit the floor and shattered. He stood frozen, staring at Polina, whose scales were shifting through nervous patterns of silver and pale blue. "You can talk," Dave whispered. "I have been trying to tell you for days," Polina said, the words careful but clearly understandable. "Your language is complex, but I learn quickly." "We all do." Dave sank into his chair, mind reeling. All this time he had been talking to Polina like a pet, never realizing the creature understood every word. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Fear," Polina admitted. "Humans who discover we can communicate typically inform the authorities immediately. You were different. You showed kindness first. I needed to be certain you could be trusted." "Authorities?" Dave's voice came out strangely. "You mean the search teams?" Polina's scales darkened to the deep colors Dave associated with anger and distress. "They are not what your people believe them to be. We were not animals that escaped from a diplomatic vessel. We are the diplomatic mission." The words hit Dave like a physical blow. "You're diplomats." "I am the offspring of Elder Council member Velthara of the Drakmori. The others captured with me are also children of ranking officials. We were sent to Earth as part of our first cultural exchange, to learn about humans and establish formal relations between our species." Dave felt sick. Then the crash, it was not an accident. We were shot down by Federation forces who oppose our mission to Earth. They cannot allow humans to form alliances outside Federation control. Polina's voice carried a bitter edge that sounded far too mature for such a young creature. Federation, the Galactic Federation that your world recently joined. They maintain power by keeping member species isolated and dependent. Humans were never meant to remain planet-bound this long. Your people should have had interstellar travel decades ago. Dave's world tilted on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was wrong. So the search teams are keeping my companions prisoner while they decide how to eliminate the evidence of their crime. They cannot allow word to reach the Drakmori Council about what happened here. The casual way Polina spoke about being eliminated made Dave's blood run cold. They want to kill you? All of us. The story will be that dangerous alien predators had to be destroyed for public safety. Polina moved closer to Dave, scales shifting to protective gold patterns. You saved my life by hiding me, Dave Sullivan. More than that, you treated me with kindness when you believed I was merely an animal. This is why humans fascinate the older members of my species. Fascinate them? Your capacity for compassion toward beings you do not understand. Most intelligent species require proof of intelligence before extending basic kindness. Humans often show mercy first and ask questions later. It is a rare quality in the galaxy. Dave thought about that, remembering how he had wrapped Polina in his apron without hesitation, how he had spent his own money on supplies to care for an unknown creature. It had never occurred to him to do anything else. The others who were captured, Dave said slowly. Where are they being held? A facility approximately 12 kilometers north of the city. I can sense their presence, though the connection grows weaker each day. They are being kept in containment units designed to suppress our natural abilities. What kind of abilities? For the first time since learning to speak, Polina looked hesitant. Perhaps it is better to show you. The creature stood and walked to Dave's cluttered coffee table. It placed one clawed hand on the surface and closed its eyes in concentration. Dave watched in amazement as the chaotic pile of mail, tools, and random objects began organizing itself. Bills floated into a neat stack. His scattered barber tools arranged themselves in perfect order. Even the TV remote, missing for 3 weeks, emerged from between the couch cushions and settled into its designated spot. Telekinesis? Dave breathed. Among other things. We are what humans once called dragons, though your legends remember us imperfectly. My people visited Earth long ago before your recorded history began. We have been watching your species develop ever since. Watching us? With growing respect. Humans have something most galactic species lost long ago in their technological advancement. You retain the ability to see individuals rather than just categories. You adapt. You innovate using whatever resources are available. You form bonds across species barriers. Polina's scales warmed to gentle gold. You rescue injured strangers and ask for nothing in return. Dave felt overwhelmed. In the space of one conversation, his understanding of everything had shifted completely. He was harboring not just an alien, but the child of alien royalty. The authorities hunting them weren't trying to protect anyone. They were covering up what amounted to an act of war. What happens now? He asked. Now we must decide if you are willing to help me rescue my companions. I cannot do it alone. I am still young and my abilities are limited. But together, combining human ingenuity with Drakmori capabilities, we might succeed. Dave looked at this remarkable being who had crashed through his window and turned his quiet life upside down. Everything about this situation was beyond his understanding, beyond his experience, beyond his capabilities. He was just a barber from Neo-Chicago who liked routine and quiet mornings. But Polina was looking at him with complete trust, scales glowing with hope and confidence. This young creature believed in him, believed that an ordinary human could somehow stand against galactic authorities and win. Maybe that belief was what made humans special in the first place. Okay, Dave said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Let's go rescue your family. Polina's scales flashed brilliant gold, and for the first time since learning the truth, Dave saw the creature smile. Dave stared at the crude map he had sketched on the back of an old receipt. The detention facility looked impossible to breach even with Polina's abilities. 12-foot walls topped with energy barriers, automated guard systems, and sensors that could detect anything larger than a mouse approaching within 100 meters. "This is insane," he muttered for the 10th time that evening. "Perhaps," Polina agreed, now large enough that its head reached Dave's chest when sitting upright. "But my companions grow weaker each day in those containment units. Soon they will be too weak to escape even if we succeed in freeing them." Dave looked at his unusual partner, whose scales had taken on the deep purple hues that meant determination mixed with worry. Over the past week, as they planned this rescue attempt, Dave had watched Polina mature both physically and mentally. The playful creature who had once chased dust motes around his apartment was becoming something far more serious and focused. "Tell me again why we can't just call the real authorities." "Because the real authorities are light years away and my people do not yet know what happened here. By the time a rescue mission could reach Earth, we will all be dead and the evidence destroyed." Polina's wings rustled with agitation. "The Federation has done this before on other worlds. It is a proven strategy." A knock at Dave's door made them both freeze. Dave quickly gestured for Polina to hide in the bedroom while he answered it. "Hey Dave, you got a minute?" It was Carlos, the electrician who rented the shop next door. Behind him stood Maria, the mechanic from across the street, and old Pete who fixed everything that broke in the neighborhood. Sure. What's up?" Carlos glanced around nervously. "We've been talking and we know something's going on with you. The broken window you never fixed, the way you've been acting all jumpy lately. Plus Maria saw strange tracks in the alley." Dave's heart pounded. Had they figured it out? Were they here to turn him in for the reward money? "Look," Maria said, stepping forward. "We don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but you're good people. You gave Carlos free haircuts when his kids were sick. You helped Pete fix his grandson's bike. You're part of this neighborhood. Whatever it is," Pete added, "we want to help." Dave felt something crack inside his chest. These people, his neighbors and friends, were offering to help without even knowing what they were getting into. It was exactly the kind of thing Polina had said made humans special. "You might want to sit down," Dave said finally. 20 minutes later, Dave's small living room contained 3 humans in various states of shock, and one increasingly nervous young dragon. Polina had emerged when Dave called its name, and the resulting conversation had covered everything from galactic politics to the real reason behind the search operations. "So let me get this straight," Carlos said slowly. "The government has been lying about these aliens being dangerous animals. They're actually kids from some kind of space dragon royal family, and they're planning to murder them all to cover up shooting down a diplomatic mission." "That's an accurate summary," Polina confirmed, causing Carlos to jump slightly. He was still getting used to the talking dragon. "And you want to break into a heavily guarded military facility to rescue them," Maria added. "We have to try," Dave said. "I can't just abandon them." Pete, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, finally spoke up. "What do you need?" The planning session that followed was unlike anything Dave had ever experienced. His neighbors approached the impossible rescue mission with the same practical, problem-solving attitude they brought to fixing broken appliances and rewiring old buildings. "Security systems are just electrical circuits," Maria pointed out. "Fancy ones, sure, but they all have weak points. Power supplies, junction boxes, backup generators. The automated defenses will be computer-controlled," Carlos added. "Computers need steady power and clear communication signals. Disrupt either one and they go into safety mode." Pete nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like we need to think like contractors, not soldiers. Find the infrastructure that keeps everything running and figure out how to shut it down without triggering alarms." Polina watched this discussion with fascination. "Your people approach problems very differently than most species." "How so?" Dave asked. "Most advanced civilizations would begin with detailed scans, complex analysis, sophisticated equipment. Humans look at a wall and ask, what's the simplest way through it?" Over the next 3 days, Dave's quiet barbershop became mission headquarters. His customers noticed the unusual activity but asked no direct questions. Mrs. Rodriguez brought sandwiches. The teenager from the corner store volunteered to watch for patrol vehicles. Word spread through the neighborhood's informal network that Dave needed help with something important, and people responded without demanding explanations. The plan they developed was beautifully simple. Maria would disable the facility's backup generators using her knowledge of industrial electrical systems. Carlos would cause carefully timed power fluctuations that would make the security sensors think they were malfunctioning rather than being attacked. Pete would handle the physical barriers using tools and techniques learned from 40 years of breaking into places he was supposed to fix. Dave's job was the hardest part. While the others created confusion and disabled systems, he and Polina would locate and free the imprisoned aliens. Polina's abilities would be crucial for this, but the creature would be operating at the limits of its still developing powers. "Are you sure about this?" Dave asked as they prepared to leave. "Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll all be fugitives." His three neighbors looked at each other, then back at him. "Dave," Maria said gently, "you really think we're going to let kids be murdered on our watch? Doesn't matter what planet they're from. Besides," Carlos added with a grin, "my mother always said I should do something important with my life. Rescuing alien royalty seems pretty important." Pete just shrugged. "Been fixing things my whole life. This is just another thing that needs fixing." As they loaded their simple tools and equipment into Maria's battered work van, Dave realized that Polina had been right about humans. They weren't special because of superior technology or natural abilities. They were special because when faced with something wrong, their first instinct was to try to make it right. Regardless of the personal cost, the detention facility loomed ahead of them in the darkness, and Dave felt a mixture of terror and pride. Terror, because they were about to attempt something far beyond their capabilities. Pride because he was surrounded by exactly the kind of people who made humanity worth fighting for. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," came the unanimous reply. Dave Sullivan, barber and creature of habit, was about to lead his first military operation, and somehow, despite everything, he believed they might actually succeed. The rescue had gone better than anyone expected and worse than anyone hoped. Dave crouched behind an overturned security vehicle, his barber's apron somehow still tied around his waist despite the chaos of the past 2 hours. Around him, 6 young Drakmori huddled together, their scales flickering between relief and exhaustion. Polina pressed close to his side, now nearly as large as a small horse and sporting the classic dragon appearance that matched humanity's oldest legends. "The ship is ready," Carlos called from across the facility's courtyard, where he and Pete had somehow managed to jury-rig one of the crashed Federation vessels using spare parts from Maria's workshop and Drakmori biotechnology that none of them really understood. The hybrid ship was impossible and beautiful. Human mechanical ingenuity merged with alien organic systems in ways that should never have worked. Copper wiring threaded through living conduits that pulsed with soft light. Maria's improvised power coupling hummed in harmony with Drakmori crystal matrices. It looked like something grown rather than built, and it was the most magnificent thing Dave had ever seen. "How long before reinforcements arrive?" Dave asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15, Maria replied, still working frantically on the ship's controls. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." The logical choice was obvious. Get everyone aboard and run as far and as fast as possible. Find somewhere to hide until the Drakmori Council could be contacted. It was what any reasonable person would do. Dave looked at Polina, whose scales were cycling through rapid patterns of gold and silver. The young dragon was thinking the same thing he was. Running would save their lives, but it wouldn't save anyone else. The Federation would simply try this again on another world, with another species, and keep trying until they succeeded. "Polina, how good are you with communication systems?" The dragon's eyes brightened with understanding. "Good enough. What do you have in mind?" "We're going to tell everyone what really happened here." Pete stopped working and stared at him. "Everyone?" "The whole galaxy. Every species in the Federation and beyond. Let them all know what their so-called protectors are really doing." It was Maria who grinned first. "That's either brilliant or completely insane." "Probably both," Carlos agreed. "I love it." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Polina interfaced with the hybrid ship's communication array, using its natural abilities to boost the signal far beyond what human or Drakmori technology could achieve alone. Dave found himself standing in front of an improvised camera setup, still wearing his coffee-stained apron and holding Polina's now massive form draped around his shoulders like the world's most impressive pet. "Testing, testing," he said, then looked at Polina. "Is this thing working?" "Broadcasting on all major galactic frequencies," Polina confirmed. "We have approximately 8 minutes before Federation. Forces arrive to silence us permanently." Dave looked into the camera and tried to figure out how to explain the last 2 weeks of his life to an entire galaxy. "Hi, my name is Dave Sullivan. I'm a barber from Neo Chicago on Earth, and I need to tell you all something important about what's been happening here. He started with the morning Polina crashed through his window, explaining how he had simply done what felt right in helping an injured creature. He talked about learning that Polina was intelligent, then discovering the truth about the diplomatic mission and the Federation's role in shooting it down. The thing is, Dave continued, warming to his subject, I'm not anybody special. I cut hair for a living. I drink too much coffee and eat pizza twice a week. I've never been more than 100 miles from where I was born. But when someone needed help, I helped. That's all. Behind him, his 3 neighbors worked frantically to keep their impossible ship operational, while Federation vehicles approached in the distance. The young Drakmori watched from the background, their scales shifting through patterns of amazement and hope. These aren't dangerous animals, Dave said, gesturing to Polina and the others. They're kids. Children sent here to learn about us and help establish peaceful relations. The Federation shot them down in cold blood and planned to murder them all to cover it up. And they've done this before on other worlds to other species. Polina leaned closer to the camera. I am Polina, child of Elder Council member Velthara of the Drakmori. Everything Dave Sullivan has told you is true. The Federation maintains control by preventing alliances between member species. They fear what might happen if planets like Earth formed partnerships with older civilizations like ours. 6 minutes, Carlos called. Dave looked directly into the camera. I don't know much about galactic politics or interstellar relations, but I know right from wrong. What happened here was wrong. What's happening on other worlds is wrong, and maybe it's time for all of us to stop letting fear and isolation be used as weapons against us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Communication channels across the galaxy lit up with reactions. Some species expressed outrage at Federation policies they had never questioned. Others shared similar stories of suppression and interference. A few announced their intention to withdraw from Federation membership entirely. Dave, Maria called urgently. We've got company. Federation forces had arrived in overwhelming numbers. Vehicles surrounded their position while aircraft circled overhead. Through the ship's communication array, Dave could hear official channels buzzing with orders to terminate the broadcast and eliminate all witnesses. But other voices were joining the conversation now. Ships from non-Federation species were announcing their approach to Earth. The Drakmori Council itself was broadcasting a response, demanding immediate talks and threatening severe consequences if any harm came to the diplomatic mission. It worked, Polina said softly, scales glowing with wonder. The galaxy is listening. 3 hours later, Dave found himself in the strangest negotiation of his life. His barber shop had been designated as neutral ground for emergency talks between the Federation, the Drakmori Council, and what seemed like half the galaxy's independent species. The building was surrounded by ships from dozens of different worlds, all there because one human had decided that doing the right thing was more important than staying safe. Elder Council member Velthara was exactly what Dave had expected Polina to grow into eventually. Massive, elegant, and possessing an intelligence that seemed to encompass centuries of experience. The Great Dragon had arrived with a diplomatic fleet that made Federation forces look insignificant by comparison. You have done something remarkable. Dave Sullivan of Earth, Velthara said, speaking in perfectly accented English. Few beings would risk their lives for strangers they barely understand. Seemed like the thing to do, Dave replied, then felt embarrassed by how inadequate that sounded. Indeed. And that attitude is precisely why the Drakmori Council wishes to offer humanity full partnership status, not membership in the Federation, but true alliance between equals. The Federation negotiator, a tall alien with too many arms, interjected angrily. This is highly irregular. Humans are a probationary species. They lack the technological sophistication for independent galactic relations. Dave looked around his small shop, now filled with beings from across the galaxy, then at his 3 neighbors who had risked everything to help rescue alien children they had never met. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez bringing sandwiches during the planning sessions, about the teenager volunteering to watch for patrols, about an entire neighborhood coming together to support something they didn't fully understand. Maybe we're not as sophisticated as some species, Dave said finally, but we're pretty good at figuring things out as we go, and we know the difference between right and wrong. Velthara's laugh was like distant thunder. Technological sophistication is common in the galaxy, Dave Sullivan. Moral clarity is extremely rare. 6 months later, Dave's daily routine had changed significantly. He still made 3 cups of coffee every morning, still ate pizza twice a week, and still enjoyed his evening chocolate. But now he shared these rituals with visitors from across the galaxy who came to Earth specifically to meet the barber who had challenged the Federation. Polina, now fully grown and serving as Earth's first Drakmori cultural liaison, still preferred to curl up near Dave during his chocolate routine. Some habits apparently transcended species. Any regrets? Polina asked one evening as they watched ships from a dozen worlds dock at Earth's new orbital stations. Dave looked out at the stars, now filled with friends instead of strangers, and thought about how much his quiet life had changed. His little barbershop had become an unofficial embassy. His neighborhood had become a symbol of human potential. His species had found its place in a galaxy that suddenly seemed much less lonely. "Not a one," he said, scratching behind Polina's massive ears. "Though I do miss when the most complicated part of my day was remembering not to use the dull scissors on Mrs. Rodriguez." Polina's laugh sounded exactly like it had when it was small enough to fit in Dave's apron. Some things, Dave reflected, never changed no matter how big you grew or how far you traveled. And maybe that was what made humans special after all.